Hello and welcome to another episode of the Opportunity Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Elfrink, the head of marketing here at Empire Flippers. And today I am talking to a very good friend of mine, Kean Graham. I've known him for over half a decade, or right around 7 years at this point, and he runs a business called MonetizeMore. MonetizeMore is kind of like a mixture of Google AdSense, Mediavine, and you turn it on turbo to like turbocharge it because it allows you to actually own a lot of your own ad account management and do all sorts of incredible stuff. We get a little bit into the weeds, actually, especially the beginning part of this podcast about AI and the changing landscape of being a website publisher. So if you're making money through people clicking your ads on your website versus affiliate marketing, it's a fantastic business model, but is wrought with danger if you don't listen, especially to this first part when Kean and I are talking about invalid traffic. I think this is incredibly important. And if you're not using what Kean suggests you use as a business traffic cop, I highly recommend you should go do that now before you get hit by this invalid traffic stuff. But anyways, Kean and I also talk about the difference between solo publishers and the really big publishers, the kind of differences that they have, the different kind of decision making that they do. And it really comes down to owning more data, which I love. I think that it should be the number one priority for you, I mean, outside of making money so you can eat, of course, but is owning as much data as possible in your niche. All right, with that said, I'll stop talking. Let's get into it. I'll see you on the other side. Bye. All right, I got my good buddy Kean Graham here, the founder of MonetizeMore. We were just catching up offline. Kean is a very old friend of mine, so I'm excited to have you on the podcast. I believe this is the first time where I'm hosting it that you've been on, but you've been on before. So for my audience that's not as familiar with you as I am, Kean, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where in the world you're at.
Thanks, Greg. And yeah, thanks for having me. So I founded Monetize More 13 years ago in 2010. And what Monetize More does is increase ad revenues for large traffic websites, like think AdSense website. So we have an auction technology that competes Google versus Facebook versus Amazon versus Index Exchange and many other ad networks to find the bidder, the advertiser that will pay the most for that ad placement. So we help these websites sell their ad placements for more, and then we take a percentage. And then on top of that, we have a tool suite. We have a PubGuru platform where publishers can check their ad revenues and they can go deep into their ad revenue stats to further optimize. We have a free Chrome extension called PubGuru Ad Inspector so they can diagnose any of the issues that they might be having in their ad inventory. And we have a tool called Traffic Hub, which detects and blocks invalid traffic from viewing the ads or even clicking on the ads so that their AdSense accounts or any of their other ad network accounts are safe from getting terminated and losing all those unpaid ad revenues overnight.
Yeah, that's a great recap of what MonetizeMore does. I'm curious, man. So I've been hearing it all over on the publisher side, and I'm sure you have too, the power of AI and everything that it is doing for people. But has MonetizeMore started using AI as like, this actual ad network? Are you guys using AI technology with your platform?
Yep, absolutely. So, of course, there's some of the AI that's been on the newsreel lately with like ChatGPT. That's been really exciting. But we've been in AI much before that. For example, Traffic Cop is an AI driven technology. So, in order to detect invalid traffic, like, it could be bot traffic, it could be click farms. There's also the difference between good bot traffic and bad bot traffic, right? In order to kind of disseminate that, you need a really sophisticated technology, especially for the nefarious traffic. And there's something called SIVT, which is sophisticated invalid traffic. And, that type of traffic actually mimics human behavior, right? And it's a bit of a kind of like a cat and mouse game because, there's nefarious intent behind it and they're trying to replicate human behavior to be able to view the ads and click the ads to inflate ad revenues. And that's if the publisher does it, or sometimes there's some hacking involved. It could be scraping content. It could be putting in comments at the bottom of blog pages to trick users. There's a lot of like nefarious use cases, and you need a really sophisticated AI detection to be able to determine which is the bad bots, which ones are the good bots, which one is, the human click farms of people who have those walls of cell phones and they're literally like clicking on ads for these publishers. And these are things that happen in the black hat world that we are contending with to pretty much prevent these type of publishers that are doing it on purpose from working with us, so that we keep our accounts as clean as possible. But even more so, there are publishers that get these organic levels of invalid traffic on their sites, because part of mimicking human behavior means, these bots are going through Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and then they end up on these websites, and they do things that other humans would do, right? But when Google detects that, even if it looks like it's human behavior, they're able to detect it. And if there's too much of that traffic, then their AdSense account gets banned. They lose all their unpaid ad revenues and getting access to Google demand at all, right? Which kills these publisher businesses. So we built Traffic Cop 6 years ago, and it's AI driven and is able to, detect the sophisticated invalid traffic, even as it becomes more sophisticated. And that's even becoming more available because of tools like Chat GPT. And now they're at GPT-4. Now you don't even have to be a developer to create this type of bot traffic. So this is like a really scary thing for publishers. And we've used AI to protect these ad monetized publishers. And that's just one example of how we've used AI. We've been experimenting with GPT-4 as well to improve the explainability of some of our platforms. Some of these reports, there's a lot of data to take in, and we've been using AI to actually be like an analyst of our data and say like, okay, you see the graph, you see it going up and going down, you see, these large tables of all this different data. But if you're not an ad ops expert, sometimes it's tough to know like, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean for our business? And we've used AI to do is actually make that interpretation and explain it to the user and how it can actually be actionable for their ad monetized website.
That's awesome. That's more than I expected. It's cool you've been doing it before it was cool, so to speak. I still remember when I first really learned about bots years ago. I was looking at our Google Analytics at EF, and we had this huge boost of traffic coming from the small town in South Carolina. Like, wow, these people really love EF. There's like hundreds of these people. It's the Amazon server farm. I had no idea. With the negative bots, just to pause at this point, with the bots that are pretending to be human to click on ads, is that usually a nefarious thing being done by the publisher trying to like game you, or could that also be like a competitor to that publisher that's trying to like nuke that business so they just like kind of go away? Is that something you see as well?
Yeah, most of the time it's not coming from the publisher, right?
That's kind of what I
Because
thought. It seemed like it would be a weird thing for the publisher to do themselves. It's so risky.
yeah, the publishers that do it tend to be just bad apples that are thinking in the short term. But I mean, good luck trying to trick Google in
Right.
that case, right? They are arguably the most sophisticated in the planet for detecting invalid traffic, and for good reason, right? They need to protect their product that they offer to advertisers, right? They charge per click. And if advertisers have any reason to doubt the legitimacy of those clicks, then they lose a significant portion of the value that they offer. So Google is very tough on it, and they rely on third parties like MonetizeMore to help publishers not only detect this like invalid traffic. It's important that they block it, right? Because if you detect it and then the invalid traffic views the ads, maybe clicks on the ads, you're still going to get banned, right? The real
Right.
key thing is to actually block it. And if you're a publisher and you're lucky enough to get connected with Google, and you ask Google, okay, how am I going to protect my AdSense account from getting banned from invalid traffic, right? Because what we've seen happen before is it's a competitive industry. One of their competitors wants to get rid of a competitor. So what they'll do is go on, some black hat forum, pay less than $100 to get a bot traffic attack to their competitors, and then they send it over. They have no technology to block it. Google detects it. They lose their AdSense account and close to 100% of the revenues, and they go bankrupt, right? And then that original competitor doesn't even have to worry about, that competition that they were worrying about before, right? So the incentives are there, and it's a very scary thing. It's a huge threat for an ad monetized publisher to leave the door wide open to these type of attacks. And we've seen it happen at a more frequent basis. And with the onset of a chat GPT, it's going to make it even easier to create these type of bot traffic attacks. So it's even more important for these websites to protect themselves. And just looking at your Google Analytics and seeing if there's any spikes is not going to do it, because you might be able to see some basic invalid traffic. You see it coming from a server farm in North South Carolina, like you guys, and Google Analytics. With a sophisticated invalid traffic, you won't be able to tell on Google Analytics. And even if you did, the attack already happened, and you're going to be banned on AdSense. So it's really important to actually block it so that you can grow your website business in a more confident way.
I'm glad I asked you that question, because that to me seems like it's going to get out of hand really quick with ChatGPT. Or like, I am terrible at coding, and I coded like a Pomodoro app in like 2 minutes with ChatGPT as a Chrome extension, and it works. It looks awful. Like, if I can do that, someone actually knows what they're doing. Like, what kind of mayhem can they unleash, right? And I don't know if this is true or not, but I assume Google doesn't have something like what you guys have that you're offering to publishers in terms of trying to help them like protect them against that nefarious attack. Or does Google offer something along those lines? It doesn't seem like there's something they have.
So strategically, it doesn't make sense for Google to do that,
Mm.
because say they did, right? Because they're absolutely detecting it. They're arguably the best of the planet at doing that. If they also blocked ads from showing to that traffic and then stopped punishing, then that gives the incentive to publishers to build more sophisticated invalid traffic to trick the Google algorithms, because they don't have that punishment anymore, right? And they also have the feedback loop. They're like, okay, Google doesn't show ads to this type of bot traffic that we created. Now we can re-engineer that, and we get that immediate feedback loop
Mm.
of what is going to trick the Google algorithms. So that's why it
Classic
makes
SEO
sense.
tactic, almost like SEO mindset. How do I reverse engineer this?
Totally, totally, right? Yeah, there's examples of that in many different type of industries. So Google, and they have to be the harsh punisher with like an iron fist, because we've seen some of these publishers that came running to us after them getting banned by Google AdSense or Ad Exchange, and some of them are like in the millions of dollars, right? They're
Wow.
ugly, and this kills businesses overnight. And this is kind of just a reality of it, right? Google has to be the punisher, and they have to rely on companies like MonetizeMore to provide these tool sets to publishers to protect them, right? And this is something that we are partnered with Google. We're a Google certified publishing partner, and have worked really closely with Google to kind of like hone our technology, to address some of these threats to publishers. And, as a result, they've actually awarded us Google Innovation of the Year
Oh,
in
nice.
2020
Congrats.
for Traffic Cop. And then in last year as well, for pretty much like a new offering we have within Traffic Cop to detect ad setup policy violations, because that's all under the same umbrella of invalid traffic, which can be very confusing to publishers, because the ad setup policy violations, they actually have nothing to do with the traffic quality. They're things like aggressive refreshes, when the ads refresh too quickly, or it'll be ads that kind of like overlap on top of each other. because that's like a big no-no for big brand advertisers, right? They're not getting what they paid for. Or sometimes there's like mistakes where you have a redesign on your website and all of a sudden the developer implemented the ad tags incorrectly and they're showing off the page. So the user can't even view it. So they're getting 0% viewability, right? These are things that will get you banned on AdSense. And publishers are doing this inadvertently. They have no clue that it's happening or that it's even a problem and that it's even part of this invalid traffic bucket. So they're shooting themselves in the foot and they have no clue. So what we've done is we detect these type of ad setup policy violations and we have specific reports that show exactly what screen size it's happening on, what browser it's happening on, what type of computer, like all those, so that because a big part is like, okay, it's a problem. Now the tricky thing is how do you replicate it? So they can see where it's happening the most often. They can replicate it on the same screen size, same computer, all those different kind of aspects so they can see why it's actually happening. Maybe it was, the columns got knocked down on this type of screen size, or there's a million different reasons why. And then they can use our free Chrome extension, PubGuru Ad Inspector, so they can actually see where these ad setup policy violations are happening and any other errors or opportunities on the actual page. Like a common one is when there's ads that are showing blank on the page. This happens for a lot of reasons, and you're not monetizing that space, right? So it actually shows the reasons why it's showing blank and how to fix it. So this is a free Chrome extension that you can essentially prevent yourself from getting banned on Google or even realizing, new opportunities to further increase your ad revenues.
That's awesome. I do think that stuff is going to get just so much more wilder in the future. So having a tool like what you just described seems to be a necessity, especially as you become a bigger publisher and really relying on the income. In terms of where we're at right now in the current market, I'm curious on your thoughts. Like, you see a lot more of this than even I do. We were talking offline that recently there's been an interesting flip on the Empire Flippers marketplace where instead of selling more affiliate sites, we're actually seeing a lot bigger desire for display advertising sites. Like, is going with like the trend over the last few years. I think as these content sites get bigger, people just prefer ads. They're way simpler to manage for the most part. But in the current environment, like, what are you seeing is like a challenge for these publishers? Are you seeing ad RPMs going down? Are you still staying the same right now? Like, what's going on with the general market vibe and the whole display ad world right now?
Well, one thing about, the RPMs, which some people call CPMs, but it's revenue per thousand ad impressions. The thing about what the publishers see on their end is it's tied to the market, right? On a macro basis. Because when, say, the market has gone down, that affects the ad budgets that advertisers kind of like release, and they actually the amount of spend that they have, right? Because at the end of the day, the lower ad budgets, they make it down the chain all the way down to the publishers, and they essentially are divvying up a smaller pie. So as a result, that lower competition will decrease RPMs. So as we're in this kind of like recession right now, Q4 is typically like the strongest quarter, right? With Thanksgiving and Christmas, when advertiser spend tends to be the highest. And Q4 last year was, underwhelming compared to previous years. And that is, of course, tied to the market. So RPMs are definitely lower than, say, 2021 and 2020. And that's definitely related to the market, the lower ad spends. So I would say that's affecting publishers. But another thing for publishers that I think is just more difficult for them is ad ops, like ad operations, is just becoming more sophisticated and more technical, right? Header bidding has been, a thing for many years now. Now it's becoming more sophisticated. It's requiring people to have like a developer background. There's more regulation with GDPR. There's requirements of ads.txt, sellers.json. Some of the issues are becoming more complicated and technical. And for maybe some of these like solo founders, it's just becoming really difficult. And also, like, it used to be, totally fine to just run Google AdSense and just run on that. But the amount of money being left on the table of only running Google AdSense, that margin is growing in terms of like what they could be making if they were running a optimal ad setup. So I think all those, it just make it tougher and tougher to be a publisher, with the things just becoming really complicated and just more technical for like a publisher owner that doesn't have a developer background. It's becoming increasingly more convoluted to be able to run the business in a optimal way.
That makes sense. I don't know if you know this number off the top of your head, but maybe you can be directionally accurate with it. So you said the RPMs are lower this year than they were in 2020 and 2021, which all of that makes sense. 2022 is really the downward slope, and I feel like maybe the slope is starting to become a trough where maybe it's not sliding down as much as it was. But would you say RPMs, just out of memory, are still the same as, say, in 2019, or would you say 2019 levels were even higher than today?
Versus 2019, I would say it's pretty comparable. Pretty
Okay.
comparable, maybe a bit lower versus those. But there's actually a new feature on Google Ad Manager where they will compare industry RPMs versus their own. So for those of your listeners that are using Google Ad Manager, check out that new feature. It's on their dashboard.
Oh, I didn't know about that either. I'll have to check that out. Yeah. The reason why I ask is because, like, so for us, we're seeing valuations fall, right? In terms of businesses, it's not like off a cliff by any means, but nowhere near the same level as what it was in 2021, for example. But when you look at it, it's not like they are not still good multiples. It's still a great time to sell. In fact, it's higher than back in 2019. So that made me wonder, like, with the COVID hangovers as we're coming out of this and people are going outside, like I think Amazon announced like 30% decrease in their traffic as like the pandemic kind of went into the rear view mirror. I was wondering if that's having an effect, along with everything else that's happening, of course, on the ads, which sounds like it might. I want to switch gears here a little bit in terms of talking about what you mentioned with things getting more technical and more complex, or like the solo founder is just starting a site, or maybe they have a multiple six-figure site. What can they do to start growing their revenue and like managing this chaos? And also, what is the difference between them, how they operate, and say like a big publisher that's worth monetize more? Because I know you guys have some just like absolute massive media properties underneath your network.
Yeah. So I would say a big key, that something that we notice from publishers, especially ones that leave a lot of money on the table, is they're not using the tools that are available, right? They have very simple setups, and it's kind of like this ignorance is bliss type thing, right? They don't, like, until you actually optimize your ad inventory and you increase your ad revenues, you have no clue how much money is actually on the table, right? So we see a lot of this. There's a lot of really great tools out there to optimize ad inventories, to automate things. But what I would really recommend, especially if some of the listeners are looking to grow their ad monetized websites to like high ambitious levels, just like to the levels of some of these huge publishers that are making millions, tens of millions of dollars per month, is to use tools and to partner with companies that believe in transparency and ad inventory ownership, right? So some of the tools out there, they have more of a black box setup where you don't know where your revenue is coming from, right? You don't know if it's coming from Google or AppNexus or Amazon. It's just, one line item, just revenue, and you don't know what is actually happening in your ad inventory. And they also don't allow you to run, say, your own ad server. They don't allow you to run your own ad networks. Sometimes they even force you to change your name servers to theirs, right?
Mm.
So what that turns into is very little transparency, and you don't actually own your ad inventory, right? You don't know what's happening. You don't have the control. They can even turn off your website if they wanted to, if you're changing the name servers. So you just
Hey, giving the
lose that
keys to the
control.
castle, literally.
Totally, totally. Which we think is like pretty crazy, and a lot of other publishers have reverberated that. MonetizeMore, we just don't believe in that. We believe in transparency, and that publishers should have their own ad inventory ownership. And if they give that up, they might be benefiting in terms of like, a bit of simplicity, because they could just receive maybe like one paycheck directly, and it's a quick setup, and they don't have to like even think about their ad inventory. But if you really want to grow your business to some of these like high ambitious levels, then you need to know what's going on in your ad inventory, especially if it's the majority of your revenues, and it does inform other parts of your business, right? If you want to, say, create a direct sales strategy and you want to sell directly to advertisers because maybe you have a very lucrative audience that they want to get a hold of, and you want to access even more premium RPMs, and you want to set up, deals where they want to partner with advertisers outside of their ad inventory, where they're creating advertorials, or they're creating brand partnerships. There's a lot of collaborations that they can do, with their maybe newsletters, right? There's a lot of other revenue streams that they can kind of create, that their ad inventory is a huge wealth of data. And they can use that data to really grow their business to the higher levels. So working with a black box partner or technology, they can unknowingly be giving up some huge potential growth in their business. I just want to really kind of inform some of the listeners that what they are deciding if they work with a black box partner.
And by black box partner, I mean, not to call out anyone, but like Google AdSense, we could beat Google up all day. Google AdSense would more or less be a black box from my understanding of how it works, because they don't give you that kind of control. Is that correct? You need to add some extra technology on top of that.
Yeah, Google's pretty good. I would put them in the middle. Like, where your revenues are coming from. It's going directly to you. They actually have a lot of statistics going on. The thing that you're missing out with, say, like Google AdSense, is your ad inventory is only open to the Google marketplace, when there are other marketplaces, other ad networks available. So you're totally missing out on that. And you don't have that like proper like meta auction to make sure that each ad impression is getting the maximum amount of revenue for each one, right?
And this
And
is where the
you're also
technology
you're
comes into play, making these networks compete to show the advertisers ad on your site. Yeah.
Yeah, and also your revenues wouldn't be diversified, right? Like I said, you get a bot attack from one of your competitors, Google detects it, they ban your account, and then all your unpaid revenues disappear overnight. And for some of these publishers that are only running Google AdSense, that's 100% of the revenues, it's
Right.
gone. Right? But if you have an auction that you're competing all these different ad networks against each other, all of a sudden Google is a much lower portion of the overall revenues, and your business is safer. So, that's kind of the other parts. Google's pretty good with the transparency. You can get a lot of different stats on their platforms, but you definitely are missing out on the diversification, and leaving the money on the table.
So usually what I see with display ad websites, like when they're first starting off, usually Google AdSense is like their go-to because it's just easy to set up. As they get more traffic, they might do something like Ezoic, and then eventually Mediavine or AdThrive down the road. But I'm curious on your take on that like general path. I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty positive that AdThrive and Mediavine, for example, wouldn't let you have both of them on. So when you're saying having these ad networks compete, I'm assuming you're going out to a different ad networks than Mediavine and AdThrive. Like they are their own black box provider of a simple solution, so you don't have to think about it. But what you're saying is there's way more than that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's different ad networks, and I'd like to kind of specify. So like an ad network will be like a Facebook or Amazon or Index Exchange or AppNexus. Like a Mediavine or AdThrive, that's more of a like a partner. So they would manage. Yeah, so they're like an alternative to MonetizeMore. So they're more of they handle the meta auction, and they would be like one of those options where they're kind of like the simpler setup, and they're a good fit for like small publishers. But what you're giving up on is transparency and ad inventory ownership. So it's good if you want to stay small. They're a really good fit. They have a great offering. But if you want to go big, then that's where you're really losing out on that growth potential because you don't know what's going on in your ad inventory.
So that's the other thing I'm curious about here. So I often tell affiliates, like, I think affiliate marketing is great. I absolutely love the business model, but at the end of the day, you as the affiliate marketer are getting the worst end of the stick because you have to drive all the traffic and you have thin margin and you don't own the offer. And that of course means you, like, the only data you really own is top of funnel data, which is like valuable. Don't get me wrong, it's very valuable, but it's nowhere near as valuable as bottom of funnel data, where, like, if you own an offer, you actually know the customer, the demographic. What kind of data do you get by doing this, a few levels deeper, like what you're saying, where you own your own ad inventory? Like, what kind of extra data points do you get as the publisher?
So yeah, I'll give you some examples. On the PubGuru platform, we offer things like the page report. So you'll know which one of your pages are actually earning you the most revenues, right? Or you'll even know the pages that are getting you the highest RPM. So when you're deciding, okay, we're going to start some new social media campaigns, which pages are you going to get the highest ROI for promoting, right? Or if you're buying traffic, which ones are you going to get the highest ROI? We even have a profit attribution report that will actually tell you which traffic sources are earning you the most money, right? And we even have it for, if say you're buying traffic, we will take in the cost data and compare it with the revenue data for particular Google UTM links so that the publishers can kind of split it out however they want in terms of their traffic sources or their buying campaigns. And then they can measure for each campaign what the revenues are, what the RPMs are, what the costs are, and what the CPMs are, and take that, and then you'll learn what your profits are, and then what's your ROI on the costs of your buying campaign. Because before we had this report, we saw how some of the publishers who also bought traffic, they were pretty much making educated guesses. They're like, okay, well, we're profitable overall, and we got a
Must be
lot of
working.
clicks on this campaign. Yeah, yeah, they kind of like, okay, we'll just send more traffic to this because this seems to be working and we're profitable overall. But they're not really optimizing in a scientific way. They need to really get a higher ROI and to grow and scale these buying campaigns and scale the overall business. You need to understand what's happening at a granular level and iterate based on that data. And that's what some of these reports, like the profit attribution report, we even have a new report that measures overall like ROI and ROAS for some of these buying campaigns so they can go deeper and make these decisions on how to deploy their capital to grow their businesses.
That's great. So there's a few things you mentioned there that I want to touch on. Sorry, I have a bit of a cough, but you mentioned social and buying traffic. So most people in my audience, when they're thinking of display advertising, they're probably thinking primarily like SEO traffic versus those other two channels. So I want to dissect that a little bit. Like, in your experience, when it comes to the bigger publishers versus, maybe the one man show just getting started as a little bit of a business, like, are they focused on a lot more diversified traffic sources in general, like paid ads, for example, or are they still majority like SEO traffic that's coming into these kind of websites?
There's a combination. Some are just SEO and they kind of like, they've done it for years. These are kind of like some of the older businesses and they just get so much traffic from SEO that they're just able to kind of like coast on that and they focus on their community and they kind of focus on growing those aspects. With some of these tools, though, we've made it much easier to kind of invest in buying traffic and buy traffic more confidently so that they have a higher chance of getting a positive ROI. And something that we do encourage, our publishers is not only diversify your revenue streams, like I said, with going outward from Google AdSense and including other, ad networks to diversify those revenue streams, but also diversify your traffic pool, right? So, just being 100% dependent on Google search traffic is a risk for your business, right? So,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, to like build out, other traffic streams like social media, having an email newsletter, buying traffic, right? Having all these traffic streams is super important. And especially for some of these, like we call them organic publishers, like that are dependent on SEO. As you've probably seen over the years, the search algorithm changes that can happen overnight, and then you lose a whole bunch of traffic. That's a really scary thing. But there is something happening at a macro level with ChatGPT. In a matter of a couple months, ChatGPT has over 100 million users, and now they are getting their questions answered via ChatGPT rather than Google search. It's a clear alternative, right? And this is only growing, right? It's all over the news. People are finding out about it. Even my parents are using ChatGPT, right? So this is something people are eventually changing these habits to use ChatGPT instead of a Google search.
Talk to me a bit about that world, because maybe we disagree, but I think we probably directionally agree. Like, I think Google search will probably be fine. Like, I think a lot of people are overhyping ChatGPT and what it can do, but they're also underhyping it. I'm in this weird position where I disagree with both sides. Like, the people are like all in love with it and the people who hate it. I think it's probably like something in the middle. So my personal take is I don't think Google search will be dramatically affected within the next 5 years with it. Like, I think after that, like, we'll probably see it before the 5 years is up, but like it'll be a slower transition period than people think. I think the new version of whatever replaces Google search will be as different today or different when it comes out as Google search is to the yellow pages of yesterday, right? Like, it would just be a completely different medium. And I don't think anyone really knows what that looks like. But I've had friends, like we had a guy who backed out on buying, a 400K business because of ChatGPT. He's afraid of buying this affiliate site because he just thinks Google search is going to be gone next week, which I think is a bit overreactive. But what are your thoughts? Like, what do you think of that timeline? Does that sound like reasonable to you, or do you disagree with that?
Yeah, I agree with you that the most likely outcome is somewhere in the middle, where it's Google search is not going to die anytime soon, but it's also not going to be unaffected, right? It's going to be somewhere in the middle where, there's going to be a bunch of people that are going to use, say, ChatGPT and all the other AI tools that are going to pop up for specific use cases. And some people are going to use it more than others. Some people they're always going to use Google search and that's what they're used to and they're never going to change. But I mean, even if this, decreases, say, Google search traffic, like say 20%, and then publishers, they have, a 20% overall decrease in their traffic, that still does hurt. But the
Yeah,
interesting thing is the way that ChatGPT actually gets their information is by scanning other websites. And they're
right.
currently scanning all these websites for free and they're cannibalizing this traffic in the long term, right? And of course, once publishers kind of realize this, they're not going to be okay with it. And they can block these AI bots via robots.txt, and that's a very like simple way of doing it, but that's not necessarily going to block all the AI bots that are scanning their websites to eventually cannibalize their traffic. So they're going to need more sophisticated tools to be able to block these type of bots. And I foresee this being a bit of an arms race because all these AI tools, they're not all going to be, white hats, right? And they're going to be very sophisticated. So publishers are going to need the type of technology to block these type of AI bots. And I foresee for the white hat ones, they're eventually going to pay these publishers for access. And they're going to pay out whether it's a subscription or a CPM or something like that. I foresee that eventually being a new revenue stream for ad monetized publishers.
Do you think that new revenue stream would make up for, say, the potential loss in that search traffic from Google, or like would it be comparable in your view?
I think it'll be comparable over time. It'll take a while and it'd be interesting to see what that pricing structure of that is going to look like and whether that's going to reach the long tail publishers right? Because of course they're going to want access to the Wikipedias and the ones with just like huge information. They have big brands and like the reliable information. It'll be interesting to see how that affects the more long tail publishers as well. But I'd say over time, I think once the market dynamics kind of kick in and the market becomes more efficient, I foresee it being comparable. But it'll be really interesting to see how that looks. And we're watching really closely. And of course, we're in the publisher's camp and we already protect them from invalid traffic. And we have the capabilities with Traffic Hub to also block AI bots as well. And we're watching very closely and have our publishers in mind to keep them protected from unknowingly cannibalizing their traffic by letting these AI bots onto their website to scan their content.
Get rid of this bad AI. Yeah. Fascinating stuff, man. I want to talk a bit about Monetize More in of itself because I'm curious on how things are going over there as a business as a whole. But before I do, I'm curious on your thoughts. Like, if someone wanted to start, like, they had the ambition to go big with their own publishing business, and like what you said already about owning the ad inventory, maximizing those bids between networks, like all that makes sense to me. But if you were in their shoes, like, what would you do in 2023 today to start a publishing website, like from scratch, take it from zero to hero? Like, what would be the phases that you'd really focus on for that hyper growth?
I would be very strategic in terms of the type of content that you start with. There's a lot of research you can do to kind of see what content is in demand but short in supply. So I would start with that. There's also a lot of research you can do to determine what type of content gets very high RPMs, right? Where it's kind of like because there's the demand on the reader side, but then there's demand on the advertiser side, right? And
Right.
the type of content that creates a really high RPMs are there's high advertiser demand, but it's short in supply, right? So I would look for those type of niches where you have pretty much like a lack of supply, which creates the high RPMs from the advertiser side. And then there's like a lack of supply in terms of the reader side, right? And that could be like trending things. Like I'm sure AI content
It's
is
doing
in
all the
that
people
category
teaching me
right
how to
now.
make $30 a day with ChatGPT are probably doing well right now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And advertisers want to jump in the boat. And I'm sure that's like a really good kind of content niche right now. But there are those content pockets that exist right now, but they're not going to exist forever because other people are doing this research and then they're building this content and then they're benefiting from it. And especially for things that are new, you want to have that first move advantage. Like a really good example of some websites we've seen do really well and build their traffic very quickly and, do well in the RPM side is they'll create, like a huge fan site for like a huge new video game, right? Where there's like, before it even gets released. And we've seen traffic grow very quickly and get some really high RPMs. And especially if they want to go big, they kind of like build it from scratch, but they keep their ad inventory transparency and ownership, right? They don't work with a black box partner where they're giving all that up because eventually, to get to the 8 and 9 figure revenue levels, you eventually need to build your own direct sales team and access those very premium RPMs and build out those partnerships. And especially if you're able to really own a niche, then those advertisers will come to you and they'll want to do some very like custom deals. And that's where you kind of, unlock the 100,000s, the $1 million deals with some of these advertisers where you're doing more than just ad inventory. And we've seen how well some of these ad monetized publishers that think big and they've built them very well. And this is the approach that they take.
That makes total sense. It kind of reminds me of like the whole newsjacking concept, right? In terms of the video game example you gave, I could totally see that working, but I could only see that working in the short term unless they are, taking that traffic and putting it into another site like before the hype of that game dies down. Or maybe they're like have a more generic branded site that can have multiple games like that they're doing. Like, is that kind of the strategy there for long-term growth, or is that usually a short-term play people are doing?
Yeah, I mean, there's been publishers that kind of did both, right? It really depends. Like, if it's, yeah, for like a new video game, then sometimes it's a flash in the pan game, like a mobile app game, then, that's definitely like a short play. But if it's, a new video game series that has multiple sequels and becomes a big audience, and then they have like, online gaming portion to it, then it could be like a huge community, right? And then you have like leaderboards and forums, and like there's all these parts to these websites where they go really big. And then there's like, pro esports related to it. So we've seen that long term play as well. And that's where they actually go big. And then, once they become really good at that, they have a playbook and they can apply it to other video games. And, we've worked with some big video game publishing conglomerates that have, some of the top websites for different video games. And, it's impressive the revenue numbers that they're able to kind of been able to achieve and also grow in that area.
That's awesome and fascinating stuff. So we're wrapping up towards the end here. Before I move into rapid fire questions, just one question for you in particular. I mean, I've known you for, over 7 years. I've seen MonetizeMore grow spectacularly. You being in the same industry for so long as this founder of the same company, how do you stay motivated to where you keep innovating? Because I'm sure there's people out there in the publishing space right now are like, ChatGPT, I hate this business model. Like, why am I so like? What do you do to stay motivated in the face of these challenges and keep innovating?
I would say staying true to our vision to bring integrity into ad tech and end sleepless nights. And we're really doing that with the products that we're building, right? The fact is, like, being an ad monetized publisher, being whether you're an owner, whether you're in ad ops, whether you're a CRO, there are so many fires to put out. There's so much confusion and murkiness and all these threats like invalid traffic or mobile redirects or nefarious ads and new regulations. Like there's so many things that will keep you up at night just worrying, right? And I've felt it myself in the early days when it was just me working with these publishers and then had to take this on and help them fix these issues back when it was like a lot more simpler. But I've met some of these publisher owners and some of the people that work for these large publisher companies and have felt their pain and felt their stress and their anxiety of dealing with all these different issues. And, it's a passion of mine to be able to solve these problems for them so that they can grow their businesses more confidently and just get a good night's sleep, right? So they don't have to be so stressed going into the office and, dealing with all these different issues that they don't know how to solve, right? It's a very difficult position to be in, whether you're the owner or the team member. And it's a very fulfilling practice to be able to solve these problems with technology, with our ad optimization experts, with our greater kind of like view, our knowledge across all these different content niches and what we see works, what doesn't, and just empowering these ad monetized publishers to grow their businesses more confidently and kind of rest assured that they're not going to lose their AdSense accounts overnight because a competitor decided to send a spam attack.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Passion for the game, right? I feel a similar way with like helping entrepreneurs make an exit or an acquisition. I always get a little bit of that emotional high of helping them, you know, have that opportunity comes. I always say like at EF we sell opportunities. It could be opportunity that changes your life forever in a positive way or a negative way, depending on how things go once you acquire the business, right? Who knows? But definitely will change your life. But if someone wanted to connect with you, Matt, and really pick your brain more about how they can grow their publishing business or start one, on how they can work with MonetizeMore, what's the best way for them to contact you?
So I'd recommend, we're very active on social media. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. We have a big following on our MonetizeMore LinkedIn, and there's a lot of good content that comes out there. So if you want to increase your revenues, you want to up your game in terms of ad optimization, check out our LinkedIn, check out our YouTube channel. We have hundreds of videos on there. Yeah, and feel free to reach out. You can find us on monetizemore.com and you can reach out to our team there. And we're always like answering questions on Quora, on Google product forums. We're a top contributor there. And yeah, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. So you can find us via multiple areas. And we want to help ad monetize publishers because, we feel your pain. We know what those sleepless nights are like. And, we want to help with knowledge, with transparency, and with the exciting products that we're coming out with.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, Kean. And we'll put
Yeah.
all links to go follow Monetize More in the show notes down below.
Thank you so much, Greg.
There you have it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it got you inspired at all the different things that are happening in this industry. And of course, if you just want to buy a highly profitable business, you can always go to empireflippers.com/marketplace, or maybe you want to make an exit of your highly profitable business, and you could go to empireflippers.com/sell your site. I've been your host, Greg. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review, give us a like, a follow, share it across social media. Talk to you all soon. See you on the next episode.